The gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, sir. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk shall read the amendment.
Without objection.
Amendment to the Oversight Plan of the House Committee on the Judiciary offered by Mr. Cohen. Under the heading Subcommittee on the
Without objection, the amendment be considered as read, and the gentleman from Tennessee will be recognized for 5 minutes to present his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment adds to the committee's oversight plan the examination of attempts by the administration to undermine the freedom of the press. In 1786, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost." Jefferson, a founding father, understood how central it was to our democracy to protect the press from censorship, government control, and intimidation. An informed citizenry is essential to a vibrant democracy, and therefore a free and independent press is vital to making sure our democracy works. For without the objective truth, and the truth shall set you free, that a free press provides, the public is vulnerable to manipulation by authoritarians stoking popular prejudices and falsehoods to obtain and maintain power. Indeed, protecting a free press is so important it's enshrined in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. Yet it's not self-executing. The temptation of government institutions, public officials, and powerful political organizations to silence critical press coverage in the service of their political ends is very strong these days. Democracy requires vigilance on our part to push back at the slightest threats to this fundamental freedom. And as this committee with jurisdiction over the Constitution, the duty falls to us to spearhead that movement. I've watched with mounting alarm how the President and his administration have sought to stifle press freedom, if not through outright censorship, then through a concerted campaign of intimidation and a delegitimization against the press, calling it fake news, referring to failed New York Times, which subscribership has gone to the best in history, the failed Washington Post, which subscribership has also increased, the failed or failing Vanity Fair, whose subscription skyrocketed, and the crooked media. The earliest signs of trouble were evident in Mr. Trump's presidential campaign when he routinely singled out the press and even individual reporters at rallies for ridicule and scorn, referring to the press as if it were he and his supporters' enemies. This attitude seems to have carried over into his administration. On the first day in office, the President and his press secretary attacked the news media, accusing it of deliberately understating the size of the crowds at his inauguration. "We caught them in a beauty," quote unquote, Mr. Trump said of the news media, "and I think they're going to pay a big price," quote unquote. President Trump has also said that, quote, "he has a running war with the media," quote unquote, calling reporters among the most dishonest human beings on earth. And rather than curtailing the President's more extreme impulses against the press, his confidants seem only to reinforce them. Newt Gingrich, for instance, on Meet the Press said, entirely a propagandistic effort on behalf of the nutcake left-wing worldview. And Chief White House strategist Bannon has called the news media the opposition party and said it should be embarrassed and humiliated to keep its mouth shut and just listen for a while. Not exactly encouraging a free press. A free press that is an important check on power, all the more so at a time of unified control of the elected branches of the federal government by one party. The only real checks we have left on the Trump administration are the federal courts and the press. And the President has gone on attack against the so-called judges, against the crooked media, and against the intelligence officials who allegedly have been, leaks have come from, who he said did not do such a good job on Iraq and aren't so good, and that they lie as well. Perhaps not coincidentally, we see President Trump doing these things to the courts that he's been trying to do the press, attacking them, denigrating them, attempting to delegitimize them, and calling their credibility into question. This is a temptation. The temptation of power is something the Constitution framers all knew too well, and Benjamin Franklin knew it. Freedom of the press is important. We must do our part to ensure that the press can do its part to keep our leaders honest and keep our democracy functioning, and that that's an important part of this committee. So I would urge the committee to adopt the amendment that would simply examine any attempts by the White House or any other agency of the executive branch, and I would accept a friendly amendment on any other branch of government to undermine the freedom of the press, which is essential to a well-informed society and a functioning government. I yield back the balance of my time.